Today I'm going to show you how to knit a simple scarf, and we're going to switch things up a little bit and incorporate some stripes into our scarf, but if that feels a little too overwhelming for you, you can definitely omit that step. In today's video, I'll be teaching you how to cast on, how to knit the garter stitch, how to make stripes, how to cast off, and how to weave in your ends and complete your work. You can use any yarn and needle combination that you'd like. Today I'm using US size 8 needles and some worsted weight yarn. I will link the specific yarn and needles and everything that I'm using in my description box. First thing we will need to do is make a slip knot. This is how you'll start any knitting project and is the first step to casting on. We'll be casting on using the long tail cast on method, and I have a full video on my channel about how to do the long tail cast on method if you want an even more in-depth run through. But in order to do the long tail cast on method, we are going to need a long tail. And the tail in knitting is just the leftover yarn from casting on. So you're going to want to leave yourself a little room by pulling out some yarn a few times, and then we'll start making our slip knot in the center. So we're going to start in between our tail end and then the yarn that's on our right side that's attached to the ball. And to make a slip knot, you're going to cross your yarns over each other and make a little loop. Then reach through this loop with 2 fingers and grab hold of the tail end of the yarn and pull it through. And then we're going to pull on both of our yarns to fasten this loop. I know that was a lot of words, so I'm just going to do that once more, and you can watch and see exactly what I'm doing, and then feel free to watch this section a few times over until you're totally comfortable with making the slip knot. So the next step is to take one of our knitting needles and insert it through our slip knot and then secure it by just tugging a little bit on both of our yarn strands. It doesn't have to be super tight, but just enough so that it doesn't slip off of our needle. So now it is time to cast on. So we will hold our yarn strands in our left hand while holding the needle in our right, and we'll push our 2 yarn strands apart using our pointer finger and our thumb. Then we will flip our hand up, and using our needle we will push it through the loop on our thumb, around and through the loop on our pointer finger, and then back through the loop on our thumb. So we're taking our pointer finger and our thumb and pushing these 2 yarn strands apart. Our needle will go under and through the loop on our thumb, around and through the loop on our pointer finger, and then back through the loop on our thumb, and we'll pull a little bit on both of our yarn strands to secure it to our needle. I have a separate video on my channel that goes through the long tail cast on method in much more detail and a little bit slower, so I will link that here if you want to pause the video and practice the long tail cast on method. There are so many ways of casting on, so if you have a preferred method, please feel free to use that. It does not matter what cast on method you use, but this is just my favorite. For my scarf, I decided to cast on 20 stitches, but if you'd like to cast on more or less, definitely go for it. Depending on what yarn and needle size you're using and how many stitches you cast on, that will determine the width of your scarf. And now it is time to knit our first stitch. So, holding our needle in our right hand, we are going to insert it through our first stitch on our left needle. We'll insert it under and through the first stitch on our left needle, and then taking our working yarn that's attached to our yarn ball, we will wrap this around and in between both needles, and then we will pull our right needle under and through and then slip it off. So we'll take the tip of our right needle and push it under and through the loop on our left needle, and using our working yarn, wrap it around and in between, and then pull our right needle through and slip the stitches off. So we will keep repeating this motion until we reach the very last stitch on our left needle. And don't worry if not every stitch is perfect or if you drop some stitches. The main goal here is to just practice doing this over and over again so that you can get the hang of it. So we've just knit our last stitch, which means that we've knit an entire row. So congratulations, you've knit your very first row and you should be very proud of yourself. So now that we've knit one row, we are simply going to repeat this. You're going to want to put your needle with your stitches back in your left hand and your empty needle in your right. This is how we will start every new row. I'm going to make my stripes 6 rows each. So every 6 rows, I'm going to switch colors, and I'm going to show you how to join the new color once I've knit my 6th row. So I've just finished my 6th row and I've inserted my right needle into the first stitch as if I was going to continue knitting, but instead of using my purple yarn, I'm simply going to lay my pink yarn over my needle as if I was going to knit it. So I'm not tying it or making a knot or anything, I'm just laying the pink yarn over the right needle. And then we're just going to act as if it's the purple yarn and knit as normal. Now, since we're working with two colors, we want to kind of seamlessly switch colors without having to cut our yarn every time we begin a new stripe, because that means weaving in a million ends, and that's not fun for anybody. And what this is called is basically carrying your yarn up the side of your work, and it can be great when you're doing any kind of color work, and especially if you're doing stripes. So for my scarf, each stripe equals 6 rows, but every 4th row I'm going to twist our yarn at the side so that the color that we will soon be using again is in the correct area. So I'm going to show you right now. I just knit my 4th row for my pink stripe, and I'm going to take my purple yarn and put it over my pink, and then I'm going to pick the pink yarn up from underneath. And when I start knitting with it, it will catch the purple yarn and it'll bring it with us. So instead of just sitting there until we've finished our 6th row of the pink stripe, it's going to come with us as we complete our pink stripe, and then it will be in the correct position when it's time for us to knit with it again. So I'm just going to continue knitting, remembering to twist my yarn every 4th row of each stripe. And I have a whole entire written pattern for this scarf that's free. I know it can be helpful sometimes to not only see the visual, but also to see the written pattern. So I will link that for you guys down below. Those are the basic steps to starting your first scarf. I'm going to continue knitting this way until my scarf is as long as I want it to be. If you're working on this project, please do tag me on Instagram, because I would love to see what you're doing and what color combinations you've come up with. Once your scarf is as long as you want it, it is now time to cast off. So to start casting off, we're just going to knit our first 2 stitches as normal. And then once we have these 2 stitches on our right needle, we will take the tip of our left needle and pull the second stitch over the first and let it drop off. So we'll knit the next stitch, and we have 2 stitches now on our right needle, and then we will pull the second stitch over the first and let it drop. And we will just continue doing this until we've reached our final stitch. So this is the last stitch on our needle. We're going to knit it like normal, and then I'm just going to put my needle down and do this by hand, but I'm going to pull the second stitch over the first, and then I'm going to slide my needle out, and then we're just going to tie this loop and secure it. The last and final step to finish our scarf is just to weave in some of the loose ends we have. There are a lot of different ways to weave in your ends, but today I'm just going to do a super simple method, and I'm just going to wrap my tapestry needle around 4 or 5 stitches going horizontally, and then pull my yarn through, and then I'll do this going in the opposite direction. And you don't need to tie any knots unless you want to make sure it's super secure, but this is normally what I do, and everything stays in place. So once you've weaved in all of your ends, you are now finished with your scarf. I really hope this video was helpful for you, and if you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments below. I am happy to help you, and I will see you in my next video.